This is The Strange Recital, a podcast about fiction which questions the nature of reality.
Living half a century is no great accomplishment. I've done it and more. Living through tomorrow may be something much bigger. Tomorrow a group of people, every one of them younger than I, will take a great saw and rip through my sternum and insert steel claws and crank my rib cage open and spread me like a lobster. I don't believe in priests, so I'll make my confession directly to God, who hides in the pure white expanse of this blank page. If I live, I will live a new way. I'm ready to say this not merely because of the grim surprise with which I realize daily that I am precisely what I thought I'd never be, a middle-aged man, a man growing old whose body is failing, who may die soon. And not merely because deathbed repentance is attractive and convenient, even to someone like me who has always rejected such pathetic whimpers of fear, but because today I received a message of redemption. In the face of a little girl, I saw forgiveness. The story is easy to remember, but not to tell. It's about love and emptiness. The year I turned 40, I begged, or rather, demanded rudely, that a voice speak to me, that he stop hiding in spiteful silence behind that grand, impenetrable drapery of blackness above my head. I was standing at the side of a hospital bed where my wife lay dying of ovarian cancer. The steel rail was cold in my fists. The machinery hummed, whooshed, beeped. Now and then her brow folded up like a fist, but her eyes stayed closed. She was shriveled, unrecognizable. All I could think of was the hypnotic glitter of the Milky Way and how desperately, bitterly, I wanted to understand eternal space. I behaved like a thoughtless imbecile. I shouted up at him, at God, at the ceiling. An angry nurse blew in like a gale gusting through white curtains, hissing, threatening to have me removed, forcibly if necessary. Later, in one final rush of pain, my wife died. I never received my revelation. For over 15 years since, I've slept on my side of the bed, with an empty space beside me. I believe that's what was meant to be. My reward. God is just. The trouble is, people disappear all the time. They just vanish. Poof, gone. This is not startling news. Everybody knows it. And if you want the return of the disappeared, then that's in the miracle department. I used to believe it was utterly impossible, back in the years before I met Rico, that sweet, crazy old crooner. But these days I'm thinking that maybe the gone can come back. In their own way, unobtrusively, they return, if you're watching. In my life there were Billy Brock, and my mother, and of course Alice, who left those gaping vacancies. But it started with my uncle, my mother's younger brother, who lived with us, who rode me on his back like a horse so that my clearest memory of him is the thick, shiny tangle of the back of his head, wet ropes the color of coffee beans, and a sweet scent, like a fruity wine, of wildroot hair tonic. Then, before I was 8, he was gone. He came home alone one day, home too early from his job with my father, wearing a fat white bandage around his right hand. His face is dim in my memory, but I know his skin was pale, a white forehead spiked by a dark lock hanging down. He was thin, young, couldn't have been more than 25, I realize now. That day he came in tense, pacing, silent. He scared me. I escaped to the backyard, and while I sat under our willow reading, their voices, his and hers, my mother's, shouted in distant echoes from inside the solid bricks of our house, and I tried not to listen, and I remember not a word. As I tried to focus on the page, a page full of diagrams of rockets, I heard the front door slam. That was my Uncle Davy leaving. I never saw him again. Somehow I knew even then that that was the beginning of the end of our family. My name is Johnson Burgess. Not the old standard John, but Johnson after Ben. My mother, in love with her own sense of irony, wanted to make a statement about negative capability, perhaps her own, perhaps my father's, perhaps mine, and so I was named for Britain's most admired playwright of the 17th century, who towered and gloated over, who praised and patronized his failing friend Shakespeare, but who today is lost in the master's shadow, all but forgotten, merely a minor player. And in his dim beginnings, before all his avid self-promotion, Ben Jonson was a bricklayer, like my father. Maybe she knew my father would rise above sweaty labor to his own higher plane of banality, too. She would chuckle low in her throat. She thought such contrivances were funny, like a jazzman tossing a riff from Mary Had a Little Lamb into his solo, a sort of inside joke, her personal comic subversion in a humorless dark universe. When I was 6, my uncle's secret name for me was Muscles. Since he said, with a name like Johnson, some might think that my father's name was John. But no, it was Sam, and Samson would hardly do now, would it? But I could be like Samson someday, he said, with a wild, wicked girlfriend, and biceps, and hair, and a fatal flaw. I didn't know what he meant by all that, but I did know about Samson, since my father read me Bible stories every other night at bedtime. My father and mother had an arrangement, a sort of alternating current that powered all my perceptions then and I suppose now. On my mother's nights, she read to me stories of her choice, and I suffered through them, often yawning or dreaming, but sometimes enthralled, adrift, sunken in a syrup of words, in her soft, deep voice. Dostoevsky and Kafka, and now and then Dickens, for a bright note. Odd how just now I felt a sudden longing, a deep twinge like the flex of a muscle somewhere near my heart, a longing for her to be here at the side of my bed, reading to me, reading anything, I don't care, caressing soft syllables with that voice like whiskey on velvet, filling with its deep folds this sterile, hard room, where now, without her, every sound, even a rustle, a whisper, clangs and echoes like a bloody bullet dropped in a surgeon's pan. And the rustles, the whispers I hear, are my heart, wheezing to force my blood through an ever-narrowing space, a gate where some freak twist of DNA raised a lump that year by year has gathered coats of calcium, layered like geologic sediments recording the history of my heart, my life. A congenital aortic stenosis. Thank you, Mother. Thank you, Father. Thank you, God. Now I know, so I can say, my sin is this. I have lived a life obsessed by emptiness, on a quest for absolute vacancy. Consider this cup, made of plain white styrofoam, from which I've been taking meager sips of water as I stare out the window, over the parking lot, past the trees to the highway, stare and sit for hours as I do every day, trapped in this hospital bed. The cup is empty now, once full of water, now empty, now ready, you might even say willing, to be filled again. What is the truth of a cup? What is the shape of an enclosed space when the enclosure is taken away? What remains here after my fingers clip and fumble in a flurry of fervent deconstruction? After I break away white chips like dry little ice floes, snapping them off one by one to end in a papery jumble on the table. Mere flakes, capable of nothing. What is left? There's no answer in the tiny hill of polystyrene stones, an airy white ruin. No, but beyond it there, still wavering like heat in the peachy afternoon light, I see the emptiness of the cup. I see its shape, its essence. Its essence is absence. Its center lacks a center. A cup without a yawning open cavity like a wound is no cup at all. A receptacle must be receptive. The truth of a cup is vacancy. Like the antique blue bottle we found in a trash can, Billy Brock and I, loitering in the fall sunshine on the way home from school. "Break it," I said to Billy. "No way, man, it's cool. I'm going to put it in my window." He held the bottle up to the sun to see its cobalt flash, its sapphire shimmer. I grabbed it from his hand and smashed it on the street. Try it. Break a beautiful blue glass bottle. Shatter it on the sidewalk. Watch the azure diamonds explode in a spray. Then search like I do. Search in delight for the space that was in the bottle. You'll never find it, oh no, and that's the secret. That's why it's so beautiful, so perfect. Its filtered light transcendent as moonbeams, sublime as starlight, far beyond your grasp, beyond the capture of the carnal and mundane, the mud of flesh and stone. But it's there, that shape of air. It's eternally the same, the delicate phantom of some impeccable interior, untraceable without its bounds, the abyss in embryo, the laughing quicksilver spirit of Hermes, god of enclosed spaces, like gardens and tombs, and bottles full of indigo light like the womb of a saint. Billy was angry. He shoved me and I sat heavily on the asphalt. "You dumb shit, why'd you do that?" He walked away, shaking his head. I looked for the bottle, the flawless, empty shape of the bottle, there, where some infinitesimal thickness of summer air wavered and was gone. I sat still and watched a flicker of sun glint off a knife-like shard of blue. I felt happy.
That was A Confession of Love and Emptiness, written and read by Brent Robison. This is an excerpt from a longer story which appears in Brent's book, The Principle of Ultimate Indivisibility, a collection of linked short stories. We'll be right back after this. Brent, this story you've written, a lot of people might find it sad, with all the open heart surgery, cancer and death.
Thanks for inviting me out tonight. I don't know about you, but man, I get stir crazy in the winter. Gotta get out and mix with humanity a bit. First I need solitude for sanity, then the solitude makes me crazy. Sorry, what was your question?
Is this a sad story?
Oh, well, it's both sad and not sad. By the way, this excerpt is only a fifth or a sixth of the whole story, which you read, in my collection, The Principle of Ultimate Indivisibility.
Yeah.
And I even put the story up on Amazon by itself, a 99-cent ebook, see what happens.
Could be huge.
But it was also nominated for a Pushcart Prize by the literary journal Silent Voices, where it was first published.
All right.
Anyway, for what it's worth, I think readers like stories that are both sad and not sad.
The thing is, I don't really find it sad. I think your examination of emptiness takes it somewhere else. Your character who's about to undergo surgery becomes an observer of himself. Dispassionate, even.
Yes, well, it's always a goal of mine in my writing to touch both the heart and the mind. I love to read stuff that makes me think and wonder, and I really want to avoid sentimentalism, emotional manipulation. This story may walk that borderline a bit.
I'm not so sure about him ranting at God, though. I understand he was in a very difficult situation. Still, cursing's just the other side of praising, isn't it?
Yeah.
It would be nice if people could get through tough spots without recourse to religion. But that's just me.
Well, it's me too, I agree. Cursing and praising, two sides of the same coin. But that's where this guy is at in his evolution.
Okay.
He was indoctrinated by his religious father, but luckily his mother gave him some balance in that regard. Although she did her own kind of damage, as the full story shows. But I like to think he's on his way to leaving behind that infantilizing dependence on a cosmic daddy,
Yeah.
In this story, he takes a step toward letting go of guilt, which is part of it. At one time, I thought the story was going to become a novel, but the infinitude of possibilities swamped me. I had to cut it off.
Can I get you guys anything?
Sure. I'll take a glass of red wine. What do you want, Brent? I'll buy. That's a sign of my appreciation for your story.
Well, thanks. I'll take a beer, please.
What kind of beer do you want?
I don't know. What do you have?
They're up there.
It's too dark in here. I can't read the labels.
Just pick something, okay? I'll give you a few minutes.
I like the way you talk about the empty cup. When the cup is disintegrated, what becomes of the emptiness? Does that mean emptiness can only exist if it is contained by something?
Well, I wanted to suggest that once there's been a containment, maybe there will always be one, existing in some invisible sphere. It's another way of getting at the non-dual nature of things, like dark and light. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah. Only when a container has nothing in it can it be considered empty. So, emptiness is a relative concept.
Yeah.
Without the container, it's meaningless. A bit like Einstein's idea of the extended present in his special theory of relativity. A moment cannot be perceived objectively. I take that to mean that there's no such thing as...
Do you know what you want yet?
Yeah, I'll take a Lagunitas, please.
We don't have that.
Okay. How about a Modelo?
We're out of that right now.
Geez, do you have Beck's?
Yep.
Okay, I'll take one of those.
You want that in a glass?
No glass, thanks.
Is space empty? Not really, I suppose. It's full of planets and all kinds of junk.
Not to mention all the in-between stuff, the stuff that is detected gravitationally or with computation, but can't otherwise be found, what they call dark matter. But to our perception, space is mostly just vast tracts of emptiness.
So, does that mean that space is contained by something? Is the universe a bubble in a rock?
I think you may be onto something there. You should publish a theory paper.
You ever seen those films of astronauts drinking out of bags? Some of the water gets out and floats around in bubbles. They just catch it in their mouths as they drift by. It's a whole different way of thinking about liquid.
I don't think I've seen that. But thinking about liquid, I wonder where my beer is.
That cup of yours in the story, is it a metaphor for a person or the psyche of your character?
I'd say the narrator fears his own emptiness, possibly his own unworthiness to actually exist. So the cup, the blue bottle, they can be seen as metaphors, but also
Here you
as...
go. That'll be 15.
Excuse me,
Yes?
he didn't want it in a bottle.
He said he didn't want a glass.
I know, but
Well, do you want the beer or not?
Yeah.
he wants the beer. He just doesn't want it in a bottle or in a glass.
What's that supposed to mean? He wants to drink it out of my cupped hands or something?
I didn't say that.
So you think you're funny? Look, I've got enough to deal with. You guys can leave. Get out right now. Go.
Okay. Oh man, it's freezing out here.
That bartender wasn't very friendly. No sense of humor.
Yeah, but maybe you came on a bit too strong.
Really?
Yeah. Do you want to try again somewhere else?
This is The Strange Recital. Our website is thestrangerecital.com. For the music on this episode, we had a drone running beneath the story by Harvey Jones. Harvey considers the synthesizer to be the indigenous folk instrument of our culture. Once, he sold a guitar to Brian Eno. Eno didn't want the case and left holding the guitar by the neck and dragging it down the street. Harvey's been dragging synthesizers around the world ever since. He's now part of a duo with fellow synthesist Gary Hughes called Delia Derbyshire Appreciation Society, creating beat-free electronic music. They have a new album out called Wow and Flutter, which I highly recommend if you were of that persuasion. We also heard a solo marimba piece called Dream in Progress by Rick Altman. You can find links to these artists on our website. This is episode 18122. Now give me a little drink from your empty cup.